tell us when you're ready for the thumbnail. You already did it? Yep. Wow. All right, guys, we are on right now. It's, again, Alex, Jan, here at Top Guns in Terre Haute, Indiana, and we are talking about a little bit of history here. And what do we have, Jan?
This is a British Vickers machine gun from World War I. It's a model 1912 Mark I. It'll be the second version. They come out actually in 1908. The British adopted them in 1912. 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago, we was talking about Maxim machine guns. A Vickers is a modified Maxim.
So where's the name? Where's Vickers come from?
They were the people that made it. We discussed last week that Vickers made the Maxim guns, or some of them. They didn't put Maxim's name on it. They put their own name on these. Well, they didn't put nobody's name on them, but it actually, what had happened is the engineers, weapons engineers at Vickers wanted to improve the Maxim gun, and Maxim said, you can't improve perfection. And he retired in 1904, and they were kind of glad to see him go. And the engineers sat down and they took the Maxim gun and they made it about 15 pounds lighter. They simplified the lock. The biggest difference between a Maxim, if you remember.
Let's go back, because there's guys who have watched this video for the first time. Again, you might want to go back to previous videos, because some things that we are mentioning in this video
we talked about
2 or 3 videos ago also. One being what you would call the lock.
Yeah.
And so let's tell us a little bit about what a lock is.
In U.S. terms, the lock would be what we would call the bolt. That's what they call the tear. And we will. This is what they call the lock. And if you watched the video 2 weeks ago, we had the lock out of a Maxim gun. They work on the same principle. It's a toggle. But you can see how much simpler this was if you remember from 2 weeks ago. It's a lot simpler. The one out of the Maxim gun, you have to have tools to take apart. These you can take apart with a cartridge. You just take a bullet point and push out the split pins. And you just assemble it, put it together without tools. It's a whole lot simpler.
So would this be what we would call more like a bolt?
This would be the bolt.
The bolt of a rifle that you would see now.
Yeah, this is what we would call the bolt. They call it a lock because your trigger mechanism's in this and your firing pin.
So the whole firing pack is in one
unit, is in this
unit, and that's called the lock.
It's called a lock.
So let's put that back in there. If you want to see how that's done, it just goes on a simple pin. Goes over
in
the
there. There we go.
There we go. So that is the trigger pack. That's everything in there. So
and most of the parts that break in these guns is in the lock. They issued these guns with extra locks. So if you broke a firing pin or a firing pin spring, they didn't take the lock apart. They just put a different one in.
Gotcha.
And went on ahead and run them. The biggest difference between the Maxim and a Vickers, that they're toggle action. We discussed that before. The toggle breaks down on a Maxim gun, and on a Vickers, the toggle breaks up.
Toggle. Tell me, what do you mean by toggle?
This is a toggle that goes under center. See how the toggle breaks up?
Mm-hmm.
On a Maxim, that would break down. But this goes,
so he's talking about this hinged part.
Right here. That's
that hinged part, it hinges up. On a Maxim, it hinges down.
So that let him make the receiver. There's a lot of wasted space in the Maxim gun. So they made the toggle break up because there's wasted space in the Maxim because you had all the belt feed up here.
Mm-hmm.
And the toggle broke down. Well, they made it break up, so they eliminated the whole bottom half of the receiver like a Maxim. A Maxim ejected the cartridges out through a hole in the front. These just drop out the bottom of the receiver.
Gotcha.
And it's a whole lot simpler, and they're about probably 15 pounds lighter.
So when did, and this is something we talked about in other videos, but when did Maxim come out with his patent, and how much further along would it have been until we would have seen this, I guess, variation of it?
Okay, the first Maxim guns, they come out in 1898, and they were basically the same. Mm-hmm. Like I say, the Russians made Maxim machine guns clear up in World War II. So Maxims were made a long time. The Vickers, like I say, come out in 1912. I'm not sure who the last people that used them. The Brits used them till the mid-60s.
Sure. So why would they have even came out with this? So you were saying, okay, by that time they were saying they want to come up with a new version of it. He said
the
no.
patents had all, Maxim's patents had all run out, and they was a little, Vickers was losing their royalties, so we come out with a new gun we can repatent and get more.
Gotcha. So this is what they would, this is their patent then. They said, look, I'm going to take all your parts, but then I'm going to come up with a couple different variations and call it a Vickers. Vickers.
And it's a better gun.
1908.
Is when it come out. Well, they come out in 1908, but everyone calls them a 1912. That's when they were.
1912. There you go.
Yeah, when they were first adopted.
Okay.
There's a lot of similarities between them. Like I say, if we remembered last week, the cocking handle on the Maxim, you pushed it forward. These you pull back and then drop them forward. So they actually operate the opposite direction. But it still does the same. Yeah, because the hinge is different. And they had the big long recoil spring on the side. It's adjustable. Only the Vickers doesn't have the little guide there to tell you how tight you got the spring.
So what he's talking about, guys, here, come around this side, basically. So if you look right here on the Maxim, it has a little guide right here, and it kind of told you
how much tension you had on the spring.
What tension was on this spring at the time. On this one, it has nothing there, but you could still adjust it. I'm assuming take the cap off.
You don't know. You adjust it right here, just like the.
Oh, okay. So it has a little. You guys can kind of see that.
Yeah.
I don't know what you'd call that, but it's like a vise.
Yeah. And you just turn it in and out. There's a procedure to the British. You'd call it adjusting the balance of the gun.
Gotcha.
Anyway, that's another story. These guns were made in a multiple of calibers. The British and all the Commonwealth countries would have been 303 British.
Obviously, yeah.
The Turks.
Which would have been the most popular.
That would have been the most common. Yeah, that was the rifle caliber. The Turks used them in 8mm Mauser. The very last ones South Africa used, and they were in 7.62 NATO.
Gotcha.
Another interesting fact on these is the U.S. Army adopted Vickers machine guns in 1915. Those would have been in 30-06. Now, Vickers didn't make the U.S. guns. Colt made them under license.
But that thing's cheap.
Well, most of the Colt Vickers, you don't ever find them. After Dunkirk in World War II, under the Lend-Lease, all the Colt Vickers we shipped to England, and they went out to the Home Guard and they painted stripes down the side of them so they know they was 30-06 instead of 303 British. And all the Brits would know how to use them. A Vickers is a Vickers.
Right.
But they were just a different caliber and they were U.S. made. So a Colt Vickers machine gun are like hen's teeth.
Have you ever seen one come on the market?
I have never seen a Colt Vickers.
Okay. Like it's not something that you would ever see. I mean, it would be a Smithsonian.
Yeah, you might see one in a museum. I've never actually seen one.
Okay. So let's get down to what this is, kind of the functions, something that makes this cool.
Okay. Now, one of the things that makes the Vickers so reliable is the Maxim guns have what they call a blast booster, and I'll take it apart here so the person can see what they look like. This has got a huge blast booster. And if you look, this screws on the end of the barrel, and this cup in here directs a muzzle blast.
Show them what it is.
This cup in here directs a muzzle blast against this, I don't know, piston, I guess you'd call it, on the end of the barrel. So it'll have more recoil impulse to push the barrel back. And see, the barrel has to move, and if you look back here, you'll see how that breaks, the brakes a toggle up. But this is a blast booster. Now, it is said that the Vickers machine gun is the most reliable machine gun ever made, and that includes anything today.
And before we got on camera, you were saying that to me, like you believe that this is the most reliable.
That's what they say. And one of the examples that in World War I, you've heard the Battle of the Somme.
Yep.
They had 10 of these guns. They used them for suppressing fire. They just firing over their heads to keep their heads down. And in 11 hours, in 10 guns, they fired one belt short of 1 million rounds. So they put 100,000 rounds through one of these guns, well, through 10 of them in 11 hours. Now, think about that.
Yeah. So to be able to do that, you have to have a couple of things to be able to shoot that many rounds? One being
a ton of water.
I believe, yes.
A ton of water.
And that's what they would have used, water.
They would have used water. They would have put water in it, and when they done that, they put a different gunner on it every hour. They put a new barrel in them every hour. They'd wear a barrel out. Like I said, we discussed.
How would they have had that many barrels on?
They had them. They were planning for it. They had them. They had them back there.
Gotcha.
But of those 10 guns, one of them broke a firing pin, and another one broke the T-slot out of the elevator, which is in the lock. I won't go into that. And they can change the lock. You've seen me have the lock out of that one. You can change one of them in literally a matter of seconds.
Now, is that something that actually goes wrong?
They very seldom actually, but you know, who knows how many rounds was through those guns before they started that day.
Exactly.
You know.
So we can go through a couple functions or a couple little features of this firearm that are different than a Maxim, but some of them are the same.
It's basically the same. It is, they call them a modified Maxim.
So let's go from the front to the back.
The blast booster is different. We done discussed that.
But the sight is pretty much the same. It's offset to one side, which you guys can see. It's offset, so it's not straight down the middle. All right. Next, you're going to see that it has the same
condensing hose.
Yeah, I was going to say evaporating hose, but hey, close enough. Condensing hose.
This is actually what they would call a condensing can. When they would get them hot, of course, they would make steam. They'll boil water, make steam. Would condense it down. The water would go into the can, and the cans are kind of cute. What you would do is you would put that up there, and then you would open this fitting and dump the water. So
you would be able to open this, but there is a little spout right here on the back of the can.
Spout here, and that opens up and shuts. And that's your condensing can.
All right, so something I noticed, and I don't know the terminology, but this is different than a Maxim. It has kind of like a fluting to it.
Yeah, now this is, you can tell.
The water jacket, I guess you would call it.
It is, that's the proper name, the water jacket. The World War I British Vickers has a fluted water jacket. One, to make it stiffer, and two, to give it more cooling surface for the water. The World War II guns do not have a fluted water jacket. This is literally a World War I gun, but so it has a fluted jacket. The later ones didn't have that. Cost more money to make.
Sure.
And they made them cheaper to make.
So let's go a little bit farther back. What everyone's going to notice, it's a belt-fed gun.
It's the same belt. They take the same belt, literally. A Maxim gun, a German Maxim, a British Vickers. They literally take the same belt. This is actually a World War II Australian ammo can, actually. And this is the belt. We discussed that 2 weeks ago. It's just two pieces of canvas, heavy canvas. And if you look, here they are. They're just 2 layers of canvas. They put these brass tabs on, and the brass tabs form the pockets for the cartridges to go in. The cartridges would go into there. This here tab that sticks out, these longer ones, keeps the ammunition in the box from the belt. The belt won't go that way because the cartridges, get bigger because the bullet ends this way. It keeps the belt from sliding off the cartridges in the can for rough handling. That's what those are for.
So how would you load it, Jen?
It's a Maxim, just like a Maxim.
So you'd put it straight through.
This is a starter tab. You would pull it up until the first cartridges click. You'd pull this back, hold it. You would advance it 1 click, drop that, then you would be half loaded or half cocked, they call it. And then you would pull it back again, hold it back, and advance the belt a second time. Then that would chamber around. And when you unload it, you would have to hit the cocking handle twice to get it out, because there's always 2 cartridges in the face of the log.
Right, same thing as the Maxim.
Just exactly like a Maxim. They work exactly the same.
So let's talk a little bit about the actual firing controls.
Well, the firing controls, you've got to know how to hold one of these. They are knowed to break your knuckles. You take your 2 fingers here above the grips. You take these fingers here. This is the safety. You have to pull this back, and you put your thumbs on. That's the trigger. I just tripped the firing pin in it. But you do it like this. And the reason you do it like this is you get your hand in the wrong place. See how close that comes to my finger? they'll actually break your knuckles. And if you happen to get your finger in here, it'll pinch the end of your finger off. They'll cut the end of your finger off. So you actually got to know what you're doing to actually shoot one.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the mount. And obviously this is completely different, for the most part, from what we saw with the sled mount that we saw a couple weeks ago.
Well, the British wanted a lighter, more portable machine gun than the Germans. Mm-hmm. And so they made a lighter mount. This is, the mount. This is actually a World War II mount. They're all the same, but this one's actually dated 1942. Your traverse, you release this here, and your traverse will go anywhere you want it. It's a lever here on the front, right here on the front, and then you lock it in. And then your elevation, you just turn the hand wheel for your elevation. And the empty cartridges come out here, and if you look, all the paint's beat off of it where the empty cartridges come out the bottom. The paint's all beat off of it. That's typical. Interestingly enough, the Browning machine guns will fit a Vickers tripod, and a Vickers will fit a Browning tripod too, because the spacing here and here is the same, and the width is the same, and the pin size is the same.
I would say there's a reason for that.
The reason is, like I say, the U.S. adopted Vickers machine guns in 1915 when they come out in the 1917.
They did the measurements and said, if this fits for this, you might as well make it fit for this.
Well, the first Brownings used Vickers machine guns, or Vickers mounts for the first Browning machine guns.
So let's talk a little bit about this one that we're looking at right now. What year is it?
This one was made in 1917, April of 1917. Who knows where it's been or where it's going, or
Sure.
Who knows? That's probably the original finish. Actually, it's not all here. They actually have a big canvas padding thing that goes around the water jacket so you can carry it and not burn yourself.
Oh, well, obviously.
But it's not on it.
So if you were going out in the market and looking for one, what would you say you'd be able to find one for?
Oh, 20, 25.
20 to 25?
Yeah.
Now, would that be with the base or without?
Oh yeah,
the base?
they'd be with the tripod.
Okay. When you see them on the open market, do they have a tripod or do they not?
Generally, they do.
They do. Okay.
Yeah, you can't shoot it without the tripod anyway.
Right. I just didn't know if it was one of those things where
the
gun
usually
is available, but this is not.
Yeah,
we talked about one a couple weeks ago. You were saying, that's an expensive base.
Yeah, you can't hardly find Maxim tripods, but Vickers tripods actually are more common than the guns.
Gotcha. So when's the last time that this would have been used? I mean, in a war period, who would have used it and what's the last time they would have used it?
Well, the British would have used them in the Korean War. Like I say, the British faced them out in 1964.
64.
South Africa used them probably clear up into the 80s.
Right. Well,
and depending on,
sure.
There probably some of them still in use somewhere. India used them. Mm-hmm. Anywhere it was a British Commonwealth country would have used them. And of course, the British would have phased them out quicker than some of the other countries. Canada used them also. They're actually, I won't say, they're not all that common in the U.S., but they made probably millions of them.
Really? Millions?
Probably.
Now,
over the years, because they made them, for 50, 60 years all over the world.
And I couldn't imagine that. Just the money in general, before there was a period where you couldn't buy machine guns. All right. Mm. Would this have been one that was readily available on the market, or would
you could have bought these commercially probably in the 1920s before the NFA Act? I have no idea what a Vickers would have cost. I do know in 1891 a Maxim machine gun was 1,150 British pounds.
Cow. And that was probably a ton.
Well, the British pound in 1890 was $4.60. Yeah. So you're talking, a Maxim machine gun in the 1890s was $5,000, and that was in the 1890s. So yeah, they were expensive.
Ain't gonna bother me. So, in closing, what are some things you want to talk about? If anybody has any questions watching right now, don't hesitate to ask. And then, as always, comment if there's another firearm you'd like to see in the future.
There's nothing more I've got to say. Like I say, everything I said is they are a modified Maxim.
So this would be a good opportunity to go back, watch the Maxim video, a couple back, and you'll learn a lot more than what you're learning on that's in front of us.
Yeah.
Because it's
This
the
is
same
just
thing.
an improved version.
Right.
They called them modified Maxim. Interesting, the other thing is too, I was talking about the Battle of the Somme and the 1,000,000 rounds in 11 hours. If you read history, that's the bloodiest day in history. The first day on the Battle of the Somme, the British casualties was 57,000.
Oh my God.
And the German casualties are unknown. They figure 60,000 plus. So that's 115,000 killed and wounded in one day in World War I.
That's incredible. I couldn't imagine
The
that
carnage.
much at once.
I mean,
You know?
it was over miles and miles. The battlefield was over miles and miles.
But even then.
And the interesting thing is Maxim died 3 days after the Battle of the Somme. And he made the comment on his deathbed he wished he'd never invented a machine gun because he'd seen the carnage of World War I. He wished he'd never invented a gun.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have imagined. Hey, John, real quick. So, anything else you want to add?
No. Like I say, it's a piece of history. They're beautifully made gun. The workmanship, they always talk about German workmanship. The workmanship inside of Vickers is a whole lot prettier than the German guns.
Right.
They really are. The machine work is just gorgeous in this.
I know you kind of get used to it after doing some of these videos and seeing all of the craftsmanship that's involved, right? But
Yeah.
the rarity of being able to even see or touch these is one of those things. But you have to realize that this is brass, this is steel.
Yeah,
you
and
know,
this is all
wood.
machined before CNCs.
Exactly.
These are all basically handmade. One other thing too. This was the gun that they used on the British and the French and the Americans used on the airplanes in World War I. On the biplanes, Eddie Reckenbacher, they would have had Vickers machine guns, and like the German Maxim we talked about a couple weeks ago, they'd have cut away the water jacket so air could flow through it. They wouldn't have been waterproof.
Oh, that's right. You said that's like if you see old airplane footage, you'll see that they're kind of vented.
Yeah, they just cut all that. Yeah, they cut it out so the air can get through them, and this is what they used on the aircraft. And well, one other thing there, you've heard the saying, the whole 9 yards.
Yes.
That come from the aircraft. These guns in World War I, the belts were really, really long, and the guy said when he come back, he said, "Well, I gave him the whole 9 yards." He meant he shot the whole belt at the guy, and that's where that comes from. And
I had no clue.
And there's another, it's a British saying, and they say when an Englishman gets really, really disgusted, he'll say, "Let's cock our lock and go home."
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is, to make this gun safe, they would put it like this. That's called cocking your lock. That's how you know the gun's safe. The gun can't fire, the lock's not in battery, there's no ammunition in it, and that's called cocking your lock, and that means the gun is safe.
So is that cocked and locked?
Well, cock your lock. Yeah. This is a lock, but cock it and go home. I'm fed up with everything. Right. They come from World War I. I'm fed up.
I've always heard that's from like in 1911, where you were like cocked and then it's locked. But
actually, it comes from this.
But I'm saying it's probably started here, and then we kind of modified that throughout the years. I'm sure.
Well, like I say, if you want to, I don't know. Come out of there. There we go. Look at the machine work and the detail in the machine work in this. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And these were made by hand on hand machines.
Big chunk of steel.
What would all the little swirls be from?
Probably machine work where they machined out.
So that's early machining.
Early machining. Yeah. And like I say, if you would, when we had the Maxim lock, 2 weeks ago, this is so much. It works exactly on the same principle, but it's a whole lot simpler and a lot easier to repair and work on.
So all in all, would you think this was a good modification?
Oh, it was a great modification. These are a better gun these are a lot better gun than the Maxims are. And the Maxims are good guns.
Right.
These are just better.
That's cool.
That's neat. All right. Well, Jan, I appreciate it again. And if you guys have any other comments, please let us know. If there's more guns you guys want to check out in the future, don't forget to comment those down below. Jan, I thank you again for all your knowledge. And guys, we'll see you again hopefully next Thursday with another Let's Talk History. See you guys.